All right, we're going to start with the tutorial to launch tenants, websites using a storefront. So you can actually launch your sites automatically using WooCommerce. And I'm going to show you how that works on WPCS in just a few minutes. And then at the end of the video, I'll throw in a little bit of a bonus and show you how you can then centrally update and manage all of the sites that you spin up using this storefront, because that's the real beauty of it. So when you sign up for a free trial on WPCS, no credit card required, you actually get this screen. And because this is a tutorial about the storefront, we're going to select the storefront option. And so this is the subscription that I currently have, and this is the storefront, and I'm going to add tutorial to it just to be clear about that. And so now we're launching the product that will house our WordPress-based WaaS or SaaS. And I've made it too long. Well, that's totally fine. Right, there we go. So we're going to select the region in which I want my data center to be. So I'm going to go for Ireland because I'm based in the Netherlands. And like I mentioned before, this is the name of my subscription. You will have a name for it as well. So next up is going to be us waiting for the launching of the actual application. So that gives me a moment to explain what we're currently doing. So on WPCS, you build applications, which mean that you are actually going to spin up sites that are individual websites. So they actually scale independently. It's a containerized platform, which means that we automatically scale your website depending on the site traffic. So meaning how popular your customers are. But you can actually manage and update all these sites centrally, which means that you are going to save countless hours and time and money managing those sites. So you can continuously update and manage those sites. So not in a main WP or managed WP kind of way. You can actually build out a product once and then treat it as if it's an actual SaaS application. So that's what this platform introduces to WPCS. The ability to turn WordPress development into actual SaaS development using nothing but this platform and actual WordPress. So the way that works is by managing your sites from what's called a version. And a version contains all the shared application code. So it means the plugins, the themes, and the language files. So this is where you centrally update and install plugins and themes. I'm about to show you how that works in just a second. And what tenants are actual sites. So you are using those sites to connect to domains. This is what you're selling to your customers. And you spin up sites using what we call a snapshot. So we're going to be creating a snapshot that is going to be serving as the blueprint for your customers. So this setup is something where we immediately give you the actual storefront tenant, because that's what we're going to use to offer to our customers. The version itself is not something that you're showing to your customers. That is your development environment, as it were. And the tenant is the actual site that you're using to spin up other sites where you're selling your subscriptions, as it were. Later on in the video, we're going to spin up another application, and this is where your customers' sites are going to be. This is where you're going to manage your customer sites, and that provisioning moment is going to be much quicker because we don't also have to immediately spin up a tenant as well. So again, you're going to be able to centrally tweak the code. So again, plugins, themes, and language files by altering the version via the editor and deploying those changes. Right? So if you want to create a new version of WordPress or create a new version of PHP, you do this centrally by creating a new version, which is going to be a clone of the old version, with the only difference that you're also updating WordPress and PHP if you wanted to. All right, so we now have our application set up, and we also have a tenant. So this is where we want to go. And the one thing that we do is we give you the versioning, or rather the tenant overview and the magic login. So I'm logging in and creating a user automatically into my website that I've created. And the first step we're going to do is I'm going to show you the plugins that we pre-install. So we're going to be relying on WooCommerce to sell our sites. We're going to be including subscriptions for WooCommerce that we've altered to work with WPCS. We have a Stripe gateway so that we can actually receive payments. And we have a WaaS host plugin that we've built that is going to speak to the application in which your customers' sites are going to be. So the first step of this process is that we're going to be setting up and going through the wizard of WooCommerce. So again, this is a tutorial, so we're not going to do much to it. We're just going to select where we live. So like I mentioned, I am in the Netherlands. Going to select the address of our company, and we're going to run through the process. So we are going to sell something pertaining to electronics and computers, and we're going to be selling subscriptions. And then we have fewer than 10 products today, and we are going to continue setting up this process. And after we have finished setting that up, we're going to immediately move to subscriptions for WooCommerce, which is a little odd because that's what it's called in the plugin folder, but in the left-hand menu in the WP admin, it is called WP Swings. So we're going to go to the wizard and we are setting that up real quickly. So this is a tutorial product. So we're going to keep it simple. And the subscription price is going to be $10 for now, and we're going to do that monthly. Obviously, I encourage you to charge as much as you can for the actual value in your product. So the more you differentiate and specialize your product, the more you can charge. We have customers charging anywhere between $250 and $1,000 per month per website because they've been able to productize their knowledge and services so well that even though they're selling something generic and standardized, well, it's not generic, it's standardized, but very specific, very specialized, they are able to do that. So we're setting up the subscription for WooCommerce, and we're going to move on to the second thing is we're going to go back to our console and spin up an application. So we're going to go to the applications overview in the console. And I actually have a lot because it's my tutorial environment, but we're going to be creating a product from scratch. The alternative is to import an existing WordPress site, which is completely possible and something that you can do, but we're today going to be doing it from scratch. So I'm going to call this my test tutorial storefront application, and we're going to click next. And again, we have the overview to choose the data center or the region in which we want our data center. And now, as I mentioned earlier, the version is going to decide the code for all of your customers. So when we choose the version of WordPress and the version of PHP, this is going to apply for all of our sites. Tenants cannot delete, or you cannot delete plugins or themes on a tenant. This is all controlled via the version. And this is the beauty of WPCS, the full control that you retain over your products or your tenants. So when you're developing a product on WPCS, when you're cramming and filling up your version with all that goodness that you've acquired over the years, all that knowledge that you have about a specific niche or about a specific use case, you might be really adept at building WooCommerce websites that integrate with a certain POS system or with a certain events use case, or you're selling sites that really cater to a specific audience. You cram all of that knowledge and all of that functionality and all of that advanced methodology that you've acquired into your version, and then you create a snapshot so that you can create new tenants. And these tenants are your customers who receive the value immediately. They receive the entire product, but they cannot install or delete plugins, which means that you are never surprised. You have the utmost guarantee that you know exactly what's happening inside of those sites. The customers can change the database settings, which means that they can create pages, they can upload new media, they can change the copy, they can do everything else that they need in order to customize the site to their liking. But on a code level, plugins, themes, and language files, all these sites are the same. All right, so the difference with the setup of the product for your customers is that you're going to be working exclusively in the version. So the version overview has an editor, which is on the top, or rather the bottom right corner, and we're going to open up the editor today. And from the editor, we're going to be installing a few plugins, right? So the first plugin we're going to install is our WaaS plugin. We have to upload that plugin because it's not listed in WordPress.org. So we're going to be installing it, and after it's installed, we're going to activate the plugin. And then we're going to do just a new plugin, and it could be anything, but we're going to go for WooCommerce, for example. And so this is the moment where I start gathering and installing all of my knowledge. And I'm just going to go for WooCommerce because I want to show you how you can immediately sell a site that has that WooCommerce functionality. So this is the moment where you install new plugins, more plugins, add them to your product, and you can actually go ahead and give that to your customers. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create one role. So what I mean is when you sell a site, you need to assign a role, a WPCS role to that product. So we have a role right now, we have one plugin installed, so we can only select that one product, or rather that one plugin. We're going to save it. That's it for now, right? So if I added more plugins, that would show up in the role as well, and I could assign that. If I wanted to create another role that has more functionality, I could do that in a subsequent role. So this is how you differentiate between your products. Actually, I'm going to show you how that works just real quickly by installing something else. So let's go and install Jetpack real quick. And it is going to be installed right now. And so we go back to the tenant settings, back to the roles. And as you can see, we now have a different plugin. So say, for example, I wanted to sell a different role, or rather a different product. We have a new role. And so now I can either check only Jetpack, or I can also include WooCommerce, and this would then be a plan, right? So because you're upgrading from WooCommerce to also include Jetpack. All right, cool. So now we have two plans, and we can go back to setting up the rest of our product. So going back to the version overview, we just came from the editor, and now we're going to deploy a snapshot because, like I mentioned before, you need that snapshot as a blueprint to sell your products. So what we did is we defined roles. So I'm just going to keep it simple for now. The name of the snapshot is only for your own reference. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to keep it simple. I recommend you make it as descriptive as possible so that you always know what's happening in that snapshot, because you can create multiple snapshots to refer to multiple starting points, right? Every snapshot is a different blueprint, is a different starting point for your customers. All right, so while we are creating the snapshot, we need a way to communicate with the storefront. And the way that we do that is via an API key. So I'm going to say, this is my WaaS API, so that again, I have a place of reference. I know what's happening here. I'm going to copy the API key and go back to my storefront, right? So I'm in the tenant. As you can see, I'm back in my storefront, and we have an option right here, and you've noticed that. And we're going to go to settings, and we're going to fill in the API key. Going back to the API key overview, we're going to copy the settings and paste the API key secret, and then make sure that it is saved. So after we have created the API key, filled it into the storefront tenant, filled in the API keys, we are going to create a product, right? So we have a product because we created this during the setup of our subscriptions for WooCommerce. So we're going to edit that product so that it now actually becomes a product that we can sell. So we have a bit of description. Like I said, we're going to keep this simple and fast. And so in this overview, the product data, it's very important that you check subscription as well as WPCS product. And you may have seen something happening in the screen here. We now have a different tab, and we can go over to the tab, but we're going to check the price first. It's 10. That's fine for now. And now we're going to refresh the roles because we've just created the API key. We've just created the snapshot. We can check on the status of the snapshot if we wanted to. Let's do that. the snapshot has been created because you can see that the roles snapshot has been deployed. And so we are going to refresh those roles, which has been done now. And we need to recheck WPCS product. And here we go, we have 2 roles. So we're going to go for the e-commerce snapshot, which only includes WooCommerce for now. And we're good to go. So let's update this here. And then the final plugin we need to set up, because like we mentioned, we need to be able to collect payments, is the WooCommerce Stripe Gateway. So let's open that up and connect our account. All right, we want to go ahead and enable test mode because this is a tutorial. So as long as you're testing and as long as you're still exploring the storefront, you want to enable test mode. So we've set our test API keys and we need to make sure that we save our changes. This is really important. Otherwise, it will not save those changes. And so we are now absolutely ready to go. So that means we can actually go to our products, and I'm going to navigate to my cart by checking the product one more time just to make sure that we are on the same page with everything. So we have a price, it is a subscription, it is a WPCS product, it is connected to our e-commerce role. We also have the opportunity to create a tenant snapshot, which I will talk about in a subsequent video, which basically is another way to distinguish the starting point. So you can assign functionality and you can assign certain designs of a product. So look out for the next video in which I will show you what the tenant snapshot can do for the starting point pertaining to the product that you're going to be selling. So let's go over to our store. We didn't do much in terms of design, but that's okay. We're going to be selling a site that includes, which is an actual WordPress installation that includes WooCommerce. So I would say $10 per month is a pretty good deal for anybody interested in that product. So let's go over to the cart overview. We have one here. Let's check out. All right, cool. So we have a few things we need to do. So we're going to be filling out our first and last name. We need to include a website name because that's what is going to be spun up as a subdomain under. And we should have enabled the test credentials of Stripe. All right, there we go. We have our test credentials, going to fill that in. And we have our CPC code, which is entirely fake. And we're going to write, because I forgot the website name. There we go. And we should be fine here. So we have just set up a store that is selling websites. We have created a product that includes WooCommerce. So anybody who buys this store immediately has WooCommerce, and we're going to sell another product just so I can show you how you can centrally update your sites from a single source. So we're just going to go back to the tutorial product. We're going to add it to our cart. We're going to check out using a different website name. So in this case, we're going to say tutorial. Similar checkout information. The only thing is I'm going to enter a different email address, place another order, and as you can see, it's super fast and smooth. Anybody who wants to create an actual product that customers can buy, which is a fully fledged WooCommerce solution or fully fledged LMS platform, whatever you want to do, you can do that. So the storefront actually has multiple functionalities. So right now we have bought two different sites. And at the moment, we can see that the site is provisioning. Later on, we can actually log in using a similar magic login, which will immediately bring us into the WP admin. So your customers actually don't need to remember their user information. After the site has been provisioned, your customers will automatically receive an email with their login credentials and their login link. Your customers can actually set the domain name themselves, which is beautiful, right? So we want our customers to be as independent as possible. It's completely low touch. So the moment they buy a website, they get access to the WP admin. They can customize the site themselves, and then when they're ready to launch, they can actually switch the domain name themselves. So even if you don't want to touch them at all, that is completely fine. So let's go over to the overview of where we are hosting our sites. So this is it. As you can see, both those sites have been spun up already. This is all done in real time. And right now we have two sites that have two plugins, or three rather, because your customers actually have all the same plugins and all the same language files, right? So, and all the same themes. So you know for a fact that these are always going to be in there. But the site that we've just sold only has WooCommerce active. So if we hit the plugin folder, for example, then the customer actually doesn't know which plugins are in there. So right now, WooCommerce is active. So it means that the moment they enter into the WP admin for the first time, this is going to launch their WooCommerce plugin, which means that they can actually go through the setup immediately. They are immediately triggered to think about the products they're going to sell. We're going to just run through this setup real quickly because I want to show you that right. Because I want to show you that they have a full-fledged WooCommerce site right now. They are ready to go. So say, for example, we hit the plugin folder, which is something that we can easily do. They wouldn't even know which plugins are in there, and you can actually go ahead and activate those in a different way. All right, so cool. Let's talk about the version editor for just one more second, because as I mentioned earlier in the video, you can actually add to your sites from a central point, right? So if just open up the version, going to go to the plugin folder, and we're going to add a new plugin. And this could be Akismet, doesn't really matter. And when we do, and this is installed, we go back to the version overview and deploy another snapshot. And now this snapshot is going to include everything, including Akismet. So it's the same website as before, but it now also includes Akismet, which means that I'm sending over these code changes to both of my sites at the same time. So you can actually have this completely safe and centralized development process, because now you're developing your product from a single source, and the moment you deploy a snapshot, this snapshot can be used to spin up new sites, but at the same time, you're updating the sites in your version. And I mentioned that this is a safe process, but you can actually make it much safer by creating a new version. So the moment you create a new version, and we're going to call this version 2 because it's progressive, you base it on the previous version. So this is the version that currently has your tenant sites in it. So this is where your customers live. And so now we're creating a new version, and this version does not have any tenants inside, as you can see. So the moment we open up this version, this is a clone, an exact clone of the version 1, but it's isolated. So this is where you can safely change your product, where you can install new plugins, test out new features, and have this separate from your customer sites. And then the moment you're ready to introduce your customers to this new functionality, you can move your tenants from version 1 to version 2. So therefore, they're receiving those code changes, they're receiving the new plugins, they're receiving updates to plugins, they're receiving a new version of WordPress, and if something goes wrong, you can immediately move them back to the old version. So you have a way to roll back changes if something breaks. So by having multiple versions, you have one version to house your websites in, where your customers are safe And then you have your staging environment, your latest version, as it were, your development environment, where you can safely deploy and upgrade your version. And afterwards, you can move your tenants to the new version and have this completely safe and isolated. And again, this entire platform is containerized, so all your sites scale independently. This is by far the safest and most scalable way to centrally manage your sites that you've automatically sold using this storefront. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you'll send us your use cases and your success, because we love seeing what you guys are building with this platform. Thanks a lot again. Bye.